Giantess Ahsoka, a Star Wars fan fiction. Over the course of the Clone Wars, Ahsoka Tano had been witness to a great deal of death and destruction. Not only soldiers but also civilians died by the thousands. By any measure, it was a lot for a girl her age to be going through. She had tried not to dwell on it too much, but recently she had seen a friend fall victim to the fighting, a clone she had become friends with over the course of her latest mission. Most people saw clones as expendable soldiers, but to her, they were just like any other person. After the loss of her friend, Ahsoka's master Anakin suggested that she take some time to get her thoughts in order before their next mission. Ahsoka was very grateful to him for allowing her some time to herself, and she set out the following day to find somewhere she could do as he suggested. With only a backpack and light luggage, she climbed into her A-wing, docked with the hyperdrive ring, and just flew anywhere at random. She just wanted to be far away and quiet. In time, she discovered a small planet outside Republic space that fit the bill perfectly. It appeared to be inhabited, judging by the many glowing dots she saw on the dark side of the planet, but there were no records of it anywhere that she could find. Apparently, it was still undiscovered, which probably meant that its inhabitants still hadn't invented interstellar travel. The young Padawan knew the potential dangers involved in establishing first contact with a new planet, but her curiosity drew her to it all the same, and she bravely flew her A-wing into it to see what she would find. Flying a few miles above the planet's surface, occasionally dipping a bit lower to get a better look, she saw that there were a great many cities all over the planet, even big cities with really tall skyscrapers, but they were all fairly primitive in terms of technology. At most she guessed that the planet's inhabitants might have gotten to one of their 2 moons, or maybe to another planet in their solar system, but nowhere beyond that. An elderly man who was sitting on the balcony staring up at the sky was shocked to see the unknown flying object. It was oddly shaped and had completely different flight characteristics than anything he had ever seen before. He quickly dialed the number for the Department of Defense and continued to watch the flying object. After looking around for a while, Ahsoka eventually found what looked like a good place to land, at the edge of a forest. She left all of her stuff in the A-wing, including her lightsaber, then climbed high up the trees, finding a thick branch about 100 feet in the air and sitting down there to meditate. She stayed up there all day, even sleeping up there. Come the next day she was feeling much better, and she decided to read some holobooks that she had borrowed from the Jedi library. One of those books was about rare Force abilities which could be easily learned by a tiny fraction of Force users but which no one else would be able to pull off no matter how hard they tried, some of them being so rare that they were only seen once every several hundred years. Ahsoka was very interested to see that one of those abilities was what the book called Force growth. People who used it were supposed to be able to grow their bodies to immense sizes, with one even having grown 1,000 times her size. The ability had only ever been exhibited by women, and apparently it was most commonly seen in Togruta women, something that interested Ahsoka greatly. She had already been very interested in this ability as the thought of growing to giant sizes fascinated her, but learning that she might be capable of it herself was super exciting. She pored over the book, trying to see if she could learn the ability was performed, but unfortunately she could find very little information about that. The bibliography referred her to another holobook from the Jedi library, but she didn't happen to have that one with her. That being the case, she was stuck reading and rereading the book's few passages on the subject of Force growth to see if she could work things out for herself. Ahsoka was so engrossed in the subject that she didn't hear the approaching vehicles until they were already right beneath her. Looking down from the branch, she saw some machines lifting her A-wing onto a truck while some soldiers patrolled the area. She realized they were looking for her and sat with her back against the tree trunk, hoping they wouldn't see her there. Unconsciously she reached for her lightsaber, but cursed when she failed to find it, remembering that she had left it behind in the A-wing. She looked down again and saw that the soldiers had finished loading up the A-wing and were getting back into their vehicles to take it away. By the time she was back on the ground they had already left and were driving quickly away. Ahsoka stopped for a while, thinking of what to do. She needed that A-wing to get off the planet and couldn't let them get away with it, but at the same time, she couldn't just go charging in to get it back. These people might not have the advanced weapons that she had fought against, but even their old-fashioned guns could kill. She had to be careful, but she also had to be quick and get to the A-wing before they took it apart, as they would surely want to do to see how it worked. It was quite a conundrum, but while thinking about how to approach it, Ahsoka remembered the Force ability she had just been reading about. The task at hand would be so much easier if she were able to grow herself like all those people the book talked about. Could she be capable of something like that? She didn't know, but she figured she had nothing to lose from trying it out to see what happened. Thinking back to what she had learned of Force growth, the young Padawan closed her eyes and focused on her own body, willing it to grow bigger, bigger, bigger. She imagined her body rapidly expanding in all dimensions, imagined herself outgrowing the surrounding trees and standing tall as a giantess over the land, imagined how powerful she would be at such a size. She spent a few minutes trying to manifest all that she imagined, only to end up feeling very silly when she opened her eyes and saw that she was still the same size as always. Ahsoka frowned. She knew that it was just a long shot, but she had really believed that it might work for her. Maybe she was just doing it wrong? She closed her eyes and focused again, this time drawing Force energy into herself, imagining it filling her and making her body expand, like a balloon growing as it was filled with air. She had only been at it for a few seconds when, to her wonder and surprise, her body started to change and opened her eyes to see the world shrinking around her. She got so excited that she lost her focus and let the Force slip from her, leaving herself at a little over twice her normal size until she managed to calm down and start drawing in Force energy again, taking in the delightful feeling of growth as her body slowly ballooned up to 20 feet, then 50, 100, 200, 300, all the way up to some 500 feet tall, around 100 times her previous size. So tall was she now that the huge trees she had hung out on barely reached her knees. The power she felt was incredible, and she was grinning ecstatically as she took a step and saw how much dust it kicked up and how the trees all shook when her foot came down. She was so happy that she almost forgot about getting her a wing back until she spotted the vehicles taking it into a nearby city. Ahsoka frowned. She had expected the ship would be taken into a military base. Having to go into a city to get it would complicate matters a bit, especially at this size. Unless she went back to her normal size, she would probably end up stepping on a ton of cars and people, damaging a ton of buildings, scaring everyone into running away from her. Actually, now that she thought about it, that sounded like a ton of fun. She'd just have to use her Force powers to make sure the people she stepped on didn't get hurt. And so Ahsoka started walking towards the city, secure in the knowledge that with her new incredible power she would be able to overcome anyone who tried to stand in her path. The people of Tarka had been struck with fear from the moment that giant alien first appeared at the edge of the forest. Some fled the city at first sight of her, but most remained, comforted by their government's assurances that the military would deal with her before she ever got to the city. Those who chose to stay cheered on the troops as they went out to meet the incoming alien with artillery, fighter planes, tanks, missiles, infantry, and everything else they could throw at her. Being up against the full might of their nation's military, the aliens' destruction seemed assured to the Terracans, and though the government advised them to seek refuge, most of them stayed outside to try and find the best place from which to witness the incoming battle. The people cheered as they would for fireworks when the missiles and artillery started flying, and cheered even louder when the fighter planes swooped in to strike, unloading their ammo on the giant alien before turning back around. Though they couldn't see the invader from all the smoke that was being kicked up, they were sure that she couldn't possibly have survived all that and must have already been defeated. Yet when the smoke cleared a moment later, they saw her still standing there with her arm outstretched and dozens of missiles and pieces of artillery hanging in the air before her, just floating in place as if time had stopped for them. The alien smiled and made a gesture with her hand, and the missiles and artillery was thrown behind her, exploding harmlessly a few hundred feet away. What strange power was this? Just how strong was this alien? Did the military really have any hopes of defeating it? The Terracans asked themselves all these questions, but no one dared voice their thoughts, as they already knew none of them would like the most probably answer. Instead of cheering when the military resumed its attack on the alien, they instead started praying, hoping that something would be accomplished by all that weaponry. But no matter how many volleys were thrown at her, the alien kept coming, an unseen force swatting away everything the military shot at her and keeping her protected from even their most advanced weaponry. To their credit, the military never backed down, not even when it was clear that nothing they did was working against the invader. They valiantly stood their ground to the last man, even when the alien was only a single step away from them. They all kept shooting at her even as her monstrous feet came down amidst their ranks, flattening tanks and soldiers alike. None tried to run, no matter how scared they were. What use was running when she could catch up to them in a step or two? Besides, if they let her get through, she would go into the city and put all their friends and family in danger. But in truth there was nothing they could do, and once she was among them the alien started systematically stomping them all out, even pulling the planes out of the sky with her strange powers and then crushing them in her hands, letting them fall to the ground as misshapen heaps of metal. Then, when not a single soldier remained to oppose her and not a single piece of equipment remained intact, she turned to the city and the Terracans erupted in panic. Being huge was amazing. Ahsoka barely even had to try to defeat all those soldiers who had tried to fight her. She dealt with them all without breaking a sweat, leaving them passed out on the ground, in the giant imprints left by her boots. After doing all that, she was sure she could deal with anything this planet could throw at her. After proudly surveying her handiwork, she turned to the city and smiled as she saw thousands and thousands of tiny people, well, tiny to her, running and screaming at her approach. Normally that would have moved her to sympathy, but she was having too much fun to think about anything like that. Besides, she knew they were in no real danger at all, so why not have some fun scaring them before it was time to leave? Ahsoka gave chase to the fleeing masses, casually walking after them, her measured pace easily matching even their most frantic running. She followed them through the city streets and soon caught up with the stragglers of the group, her steps shaking the ground and making a few of them fall down. When they saw her standing over them, they froze up, shivering on the floor and waiting to see what she would do to them. Ahsoka pondered them for a while, thinking of how she could have the most fun with them. Then she took off her boots and lifted her foot high over the tiny people, letting them take in the sight of her bare foot. When they started running again, she quickly stepped on them, stopping them in their tracks and holding them under her soles. There she felt them struggling to escape, squirming around pitifully and lightly tickling her. Ahsoka giggled in delight and wiggled her toes over them. She loved the way they felt under her feet, like a bunch of tiny bugs no bigger than her toes. Even better, when she raised her foot to look at them, she saw that about half of them had ended up stuck to her sole. She kinda felt bad about that, but they looked so adorable stuck down there that she decided to leave them there while she went after the others. It didn't take too long for her to find some more people to mess around with. Only a couple streets away she came across another small group running from her. After a brief chase, Ahsoka stopped them by setting her feet down to either side of them, blocking off the street on both directions for them. While they trembled under her, she leaned over and looked them closely. "You little guys wouldn't happen to know where the military took my ship, would you? You'd better tell me if you don't want to end up under my feet," she asked them. They stayed quiet for a while, and when they finally said something, it was in a language Ahsoka couldn't understand. Of course, she had already expected as much, so she just shrugged it off. "Well, if you're not gonna be any help to me, you can join your little friends stuck to my soles." When Ahsoka raised a foot over the group, showing off her previous victims to them, a bunch of them fell to their knees. Though she couldn't understand their words, she could tell they were begging to be spared from the same fate as the others. Ahsoka made a show of appearing to consider it, wiggling her toes thoughtfully over them, then finally set her foot down next to them. "All right, since you asked so nicely, I suppose I can spare you from being stepped on, just as long as you do a little something for me." She sat back, kicking out her legs towards the frightened masses, her soles towering more than 50 feet above them. "Do a good job rubbing my feet for me and I'll let you all go," she said, pointing to her feet. The people didn't understand what she was asking them to do, though. they only stood in place, looking uncertainly at her feet, until Ahsoka used her force powers to pull them all towards her feet, until they were all pressed up against her soul with their arms outstretched. Then, when they were all spread out over her soles, she made their little arms go up and down over and over again. Do you understand now, or do I need another demonstration? Ahsoka asked, slowly easing up her grip on the little people until they were clinging to her soul by themselves and frantically rubbing her feet. There, that's better, Ahsoka said, scrunching her soles teasingly and making a few people fall off. Then, lying back, she closed her eyes and focused on the Force again. She hadn't only chosen this way of messing with the locals for fun, she also wanted to use her time sitting down to see if she could locate her ship through the Force. Since the language barrier meant none of the locals could tell her where it was, even if they knew, this was the best choice she had. Better than looking through the whole city and probably destroying most of it in the process. Anyway, even though the alien's eyes were closed, none of the Terracans at her feet even thought of running away. If she could destroy an entire military and telekinetically pull them towards her feet, then nothing was out of the question, and for all they knew she could even see through closed eyes. Instead, they focused on rubbing her feet just as she'd asked. At first, they were really uneasy about what they thought were the corpses of fellow Terracans stuck to her feet, but after a while those corpses started moving and they realized that they weren't corpses at all. The people stuck to her soul were only passed out, not dead. While most of them kept rubbing the invaders' feet, a few of them helped free the people stuck to her soul, carefully easing them down and giving them some time to recover before asking them about what had happened. They were surprised to hear from their fellow Terracans that getting stepped on hadn't hurt them at all, as if they were being protected the entire time. They didn't know how it had happened, but the only explanation anyone could come up with was that the alien herself had been using her powers to protect them. Now the Terracans looked at the invader, no longer in fear, but in awe. They started thinking, what if she wasn't an alien at all, but a goddess? It sounded silly. But then, was it any less silly than a giant alien coming down to conquer them all? Those who had just been rescued from her soles looked thoughtfully on those very feet they had minutes ago feared being crushed by. Then, one by one, they walked up to those feet and led the other Terracans, not in rubbing them, but in cuddling them, revering this titaness who had stepped on them yet spared their lives. Some time later, when Ahsoka finally opened her eyes, having found what she was searching for, she leaned over to look at the locals massaging her feet and was surprised to see that they actually seemed to be enjoying rubbing her feet. They actually seemed disappointed when she moved her feet back and stood up. Did you little guys want to keep rubbing my feet? That's weird, but also kinda cute, I guess. Anyway, I'm sorry, but I have to get going now. Although, if you want to come with me, I suppose I could let you tag along until I get my ship back. As long as you don't mind being stuck to my feet, that is, Ahsoka said, holding her foot over the group. Some of them stepped back, but most of them stayed and even cheered for her, standing still as her soul slowly descended on them until they were all pinned under it. Then she used her other foot to gather up everyone who she hadn't already stepped on. Once they were all under her, she rocked back and forth on her feet, making sure to drive them all deep into her soles until she was sure that they would stay stuck to them. She took one step to make sure, and when she saw that no one remained behind in her footprints, she smiled and started walking, stepping on her little admirers time and time again as she went. As her steps took her deeper into the city, she soon encountered many more groups of people trying to get out. While she didn't go out of her way to chase after them, she happily stepped on any that happened to be going the same way as her, reveling in the feeling of their tiny bodies under her soles. After a while she got deep enough into the city that she started to encounter buildings that were as tall as her or even taller. There weren't many of them, but any amount was too much for her. Not that she wanted them destroyed, but she did wish she could outgrow them and become the biggest thing in the planet, or at least in the city. Maybe someday she would figure out how to surpass her current limit. For now, though, she was happy just to enjoy her current size. In time, Ahsoka made it out of all those skyscrapers and into the other side of the city, where she could see a military base several miles away. She knew that's where she would find her A-wing, though she could only hope that it would still be intact. She set out for the base straight away, traveling miles in a matter of a few minutes. By the time she arrived there, the base was on high alert, and the few troops that had remained there instead of facing her with the others when she was going into the city were all arrayed against her, seemingly ready to defend the base. But as she got closer, Ahsoka could see that they were all really scared, some among their ranks even shaking where they stood. Before they could even start shooting at her, she held out her arm and took their weapons from them, flinging them far into the distance. Then she pulled on the soldiers themselves, bringing them all over to her and setting them down in front of her toes. "If you don't want to get stepped on, then I suggest you start showing me some respect," she said, pointing down at her feet. The soldiers, moved by the gesture perhaps, or maybe by her tone, got on the hands and knees and started begging to her. "Good. Now, bring me back my ship. And it better be intact, or else I'll have to raise your entire base as payback. You boys wouldn't want that, now, would you? Then go." Ahsoka motioned them away and they all scattered into the base. A short time later, they reappeared with the vehicle that was carrying her ship. "Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys. You made me so happy I could kiss you. But I guess I should save that for until I know it still works." Ahsoka then focused for a moment to allow herself to shrink back down to size, leaving all her little admirers strewn about as they got too big to fit under her feet. It was a bit of a risky move to shrink down among all the soldiers, but she figured they were too scared to try anything against her. Indeed, even when she shrank back down, they still froze up and fell to their knees whenever she so much as looked at them. She barely paid them any attention before climbing in the A-wing and checking that it worked. She gave a small cheer when it turned on, and wasted no time in getting it airborne and flying it out of the atmosphere. As much as she had enjoyed her time on this planet, she really didn't want to risk getting stranded there. But though her time on the planet had been cut short, she had made very good use of it and didn't regret coming here in the slightest. Now that she knew she was capable of force growth, she was very eager to try using it in a real battlefield. With this power, she might be able to single-handedly end the war before it took any more lives. She couldn't wait to tell Anakin about this. Or should she keep this a secret? End of the story. We hope you enjoyed the story. The original story was written by Idno. Link in the description. Subscribe to our channel for more stories and please give us feedback in the comments. If you want to support our work, then check out our Patreon page. Thanks very much.